Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. You know, we always love it when you guys send us these listener requests.
Absolutely.
And this time it's something a little different. It's excerpts from a podcast called English Leap, hosted by Aaron and Evan. And it's all about learning English, obviously.
Right.
But it's also got a lot of these like really cool life lessons kind of sprinkled in.
Definitely some universal wisdom woven into the language learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
So today's going to be like our deep dive, you know, into all
Mm-hmm.
of that. We're going to try to like sift through everything and pull out those like golden nuggets, those real actionable takeaways that you can use for your own personal growth, no matter what you're working on.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what's really fascinating about this particular deep dive is that while the source material is focused on learning English, as you said,
Right.
the insights they share really have this broad applicability.
Yeah.
They resonate with personal development as a whole, and it really highlights just how interconnected these different areas of growth actually are.
Totally. So let's jump right in.
Okay, let's do it.
So the first big takeaway that Aaron and Evan talked about was this idea of progress over perfection.
Yes.
And this one really resonated with me because I think we all get caught up in wanting everything to be perfect
Oh, absolutely.
before we even start.
Yeah.
And then what happens is we end up kind of paralyzed. We don't actually do anything.
You hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that fear of not being perfect can be such a huge obstacle for so many of us.
It's a big one.
It is. And what I appreciate about how the English Leap podcast addresses this is the emphasis on mistakes, not as failures, but as opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
They really hit home the point that every mistake is actually a stepping stone. It's valuable information that helps you refine your approach and ultimately move you closer to your goal.
Absolutely. They're like, you know, those little course corrections.
Exactly. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
I love that saying.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and what I thought was so clever was how they related this directly back to learning English.
Yeah.
They're like, don't wait until you feel perfectly fluent to actually start speaking.
Right. Just dive in.
Yeah, exactly. Just jump in.
Embrace the stumbles.
Embrace those mistakes. Yeah.
And celebrate the small wins along the way, you know?
Yes.
Like understanding a little bit of a podcast or managing to have a short conversation.
Even just like getting one new word.
Absolutely. It's all about that feeling of progress.
Yeah,
Rather than being stuck.
totally. So instead of, you know, beating yourself up for not being perfect,
Yeah.
it's about celebrating those small wins.
Exactly. And you know what? That sense of forward momentum,
Yeah,
it's so powerful.
it is.
It really reinforces those positive habits and it helps you build confidence.
Yes.
Whereas if you're constantly striving for this kind of unattainable ideal of perfection, you risk getting discouraged and potentially even giving up altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
But by recognizing and celebrating those smaller achievements, you're giving yourself tangible evidence that you're moving in the right direction. And it shifts the focus from this distant, perfect endpoint to those immediate achievable steps.
It's huge.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to their next key lesson, which was presence over distraction.
This is a good one.
This is a big one, especially in today's world where there are just distractions everywhere.
It's a constant battle.
It really is. Like, how many times have you been, you know, somewhere physically, but your mind is just miles away?
All the time.
Totally. Usually because we're on our phones or we're,
Mhm.
you know, checking notifications or whatever.
Yeah, we've become so accustomed to this constant bombardment of information and stimulation
Yeah,
that it can be really difficult to just be present.
absolutely.
And I think it's interesting because we talk a lot about multitasking as if it's a good thing,
Right.
but the reality is our brains just aren't wired for it. You know, when our focus is divided, our ability to really learn and engage with what we're doing diminishes significantly.
We're not actually doing anything well.
Exactly. And what the English Leap podcast really drives home is that genuine growth comes from being fully present in the moment.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, you know, has our constant connectivity kind of rewired our brains in a way,
Oh, interesting.
making it even harder to truly focus than it was for previous generations?
That is a really good question. I don't know the answer, but
Yeah, it's something to think about.
absolutely. And they had this great tip for kind of combating that, which was to set a timer for like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Put all your distractions away, your
Yeah.
phone,
Yeah.
you know, everything completely out of sight.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, and just focus solely on your English practice for that 15 minutes.
I love that. And you know what? It sounds so simple, but
Yeah.
that simplicity is what makes it so effective.
Yeah.
Because by creating that dedicated pocket of time
Yeah.
free from interruptions, you're giving your brain a chance to really concentrate and immerse itself in the task at hand.
Absolutely.
And what's fascinating is that they talk about this ripple effect. Not only do you retain information better, you also develop a deeper connection with the material.
Yeah.
And you even feel more grounded and present overall.
It's like a chain reaction.
It is, and it just demonstrates how powerful that concentrated attention can be.
Yeah, so moving on from that kind of external focus on distractions,
Yeah.
they also talked about something a little bit more internal,
Okay.
which was the idea that gratitude shifts everything.
Yes.
And, they were basically saying that when we get stuck focusing on what we don't have, what we're lacking, it kind of overshadows all the good things.
Right, it blinds you to the positive.
Exactly.
That negativity bias can be really draining and so demotivating.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is, and what's really cool is that the English Leap podcast actually touches on a core principle of positive psychology here,
Oh, okay.
which at its heart is all about understanding and fostering well-being.
Interesting.
And a key part of that is consciously acknowledging and appreciating what we already have, because that can fundamentally reshape our perspective.
So it's like training your brain to look for those positive things instead of focusing on the negative.
Exactly. It's about actively seeking out and savoring those moments of joy and appreciation.
Love it. So as a way to cultivate this, they suggested something really practical.
Okay, what's that?
A daily gratitude practice,
I like that.
where you just take a few minutes each day to write down 3 things that you're thankful for.
I do that.
You do.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Yeah. And they even gave some examples that were specific to language learners, like,
Like what?
being grateful for understanding a new phrase.
Yeah.
Or using a word correctly in a conversation.
Right, and by actively acknowledging those wins, those small victories in your learning journey, you're starting to shift that internal frame of reference.
Yes.
And if we kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture, this practice of gratitude is really about building resilience.
Oh.
Because instead of being easily discouraged by setbacks, you're maintaining this sense of progress and possibility,
Yeah.
fueled by the gratitude for what you've already accomplished.
Yeah, you're not getting bogged down by, I made this mistake, I did this wrong.
Exactly. You're focusing on what's going well.
Exactly. And so that leads to, like you said, gratitude shifts everything.
It really does. It leads to a much more balanced and ultimately a more successful learning experience.
Okay, so their next point was let go of what you can't control.
Yes, a classic.
A good one, though.
Very important.
It is, and they talked about how, we waste so much energy trying to micromanage every little thing.
Yes, or trying to predict exactly how things will turn out.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and it can be so exhausting.
It's so frustrating, too, because you just can't control everything.
You can't, and what the English Leap podcast points out so wisely is that our energy is much better spent focusing on what we can control.
Right.
Things like our effort, our mindset, our practice.
So being proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah, exactly. It's about channeling your resources to where they can actually make a difference.
I love that. And I also love the analogy they used.
Oh, what was it?
They said letting go of control is like taking off this heavy backpack.
Okay.
And, you can suddenly breathe more easily.
Oh, I love that image.
It's so true. It's like you're carrying around all this unnecessary weight.
Yeah, and that image so beautifully illustrates the feeling of relief and that renewed energy that comes from surrendering to the things we just can't change.
Yeah, and thinking about it in terms of like your own experiences. You can't control how quickly you'll learn something or how other people might react to your mistakes.
Right.
But you can control the amount of time and effort that you put into practicing
Absolutely.
and the kindness that you show yourself throughout the process.
Couldn't agree more. That's where your true power lies.
I love that. Okay, so building on that, their next piece of advice was about time management,
Okay.
which they called spend time wisely.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, and they really emphasized that, time is this finite resource.
It is.
We only have so much of it,
True.
and we need to be really mindful of how we're spending it.
Absolutely.
So their advice was to prioritize the activities that truly matter.
Like what kind of things?
Things like, getting enough rest,
Important.
spending time learning,
Yes.
nurturing those meaningful relationships.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And they
Yeah.
were saying instead of, getting bogged down in just busy work.
Right, right. All those tasks that don't really contribute to our long-term goals or our overall well-being.
Yeah, just stuff that keeps us busy but doesn't actually move us forward.
Exactly. And I think this is a really important message in today's world where everything feels so fast-paced and demanding.
It does. It's hard to slow down.
It is, but it's crucial to make that conscious effort.
And they actually had a really practical suggestion for English learners specifically.
Okay, what was that?
They said even just 15 minutes of focused practice each day can make a huge difference over time.
Yes, consistency is key.
It is. And they were really emphasizing that consistency over, trying to cram a bunch of practice in every once in a while.
Right, it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Exactly. And when you think about how our brains actually learn, it makes perfect sense.
It does. Small, consistent steps lead to the most sustainable progress.
Totally. So their final piece of advice was about setting boundaries.
Oh, this is a big one.
It's the power of saying no.
Which can be so hard for some people.
Oh my gosh. It's so hard, especially for people pleasers.
Right, we want to make everyone happy.
Yeah, but they were saying, if you say yes to everything, you end up feeling drained and resentful.
Oh, absolutely. You spread yourself too thin and you end up neglecting your own needs.
Exactly. And so they were saying that by learning to say no,
Yeah.
you actually free up space
Right.
for the things that are truly important for you.
It's about prioritizing.
Yeah, and for your own growth.
And what I love about the English Leap podcast is that they provide these concrete examples of what saying no might look like.
Like what?
Like declining distractions that pull you away from your goals.
Yeah.
Or even learning to silence that inner critic that we all have.
Oh my gosh, yes, that voice can be so loud.
So loud and so critical.
And it really holds us back.
It does. And so it's about setting boundaries both externally with others and internally with ourselves.
Yeah, it's about being protective of your time and energy.
Absolutely. And recognizing that you have the right to do so.
Now, to wrap things up, the English Leap podcast ended their episode with Charlotte providing this great vocabulary breakdown.
That's helpful.
It is, so let me just run through those words for you really quick.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got mindset impactful, move the needle resonate with, paralyzed by fear, hinder illusion, show up for yourself, retain information, reframe a situation, overshadow and control freak.
That's quite a list.
It is.
With such important words.
Yeah, and, as Charlotte pointed out, being able to understand and use these words, it just helps you express yourself with more clarity and confidence.
Absolutely. And they also help you navigate, the complexities of life with a deeper understanding.
They're kind of like the building blocks of, personal growth and self-awareness.
Yeah. And they give you the language to articulate your thoughts and feelings more effectively.
Yeah, so to sum it all up, I think the big takeaway from all of this, from this deep dive into the English Leap podcast, is that progress, not perfection, is the real key to growth.
I love that.
It's about embracing that learning journey with all its bumps and imperfections.
Yeah.
Being fully present in each moment.
Absolutely.
Cultivating gratitude. Focusing on what you can control.
Yeah.
Setting healthy boundaries.
Essential.
And just developing that resilient mindset.
It's all connected.
It really is. And these aren't just like abstract ideas.
No, they're practical principles that when you apply them consistently, they can lead to real positive change in your life.
In all areas.
Yeah. Including your language learning journey.
It's about, shifting away from this fixed mindset where you're so focused on the end result.
Right.
To a more growth-oriented mindset.
Yes.
Where you're embracing the process of learning and developing and constantly improving.
I love that. And I think that's a powerful takeaway for everyone, no matter what their goals are.
Absolutely. So on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay, I'm listening.
Keeping in mind all these amazing insights from Aaron and Evan, what's one small, imperfect action that you can take today towards a goal that you've been putting off?
Good question. I'll have to think about that one.
Me too.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive.
I agree.
Lots to think about.
Lots to think about and lots to put into practice.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then. Bye.